welcome everybody once again. My name is Axel Anders. I'm from the International Biocyclic Vegan Network, and I also work very strongly with the German association Förderkreis, who helped to organize this meeting. I'm going to speak very shortly about biocyclic vegan agriculture, which is, if you have a definition for it, it is a form of organic farming which is purely plant-based. So this is an agriculture which excludes all commercial livestock farming. The first time we have really a kind of farming which is without any animals, which farmed animals. And also we do not use any inputs of animal origin, no manure, no slurry, no slaughterhouse waste. And a special emphasis is placed on the promotion of biodiversity, healthy soil life, the closure of organic cycles, and on systematic humus build-up. So biocyclic vegan agriculture is a really regenerative approach. And just as a summary, it is good for climate, for soil, for water, for biodiversity, for health, global food security, smallholder farmers in the global south, and animals, of course. And if you want to get more further information, just visit our website where you have all this more deeper explanation about all these topics. And in all this, of course, we have elaborated some explanations how the biocyclic vegan agriculture responds to all the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. So there is, for every goal, there is some part where we have a response and where we can work in the direction of sustainability. And in addition to this, there are some people from the animal rights side who have defined a new sustainable goal, which is zero animal exploitation. And this also adds to the particular approach of biocyclic vegan farming, which is organic. And of course, it is already a very sustainable approach, but it includes also that we respect the lives of animals and we do not want to exploit them. We don't want to kill them. We want to find a new way of doing farming without harming any farmed animals. This is the first time that this all is put together in a standard. There is a real organic standard, which is called Biocyclic Vegan Standard, where everything is laid down. And this is an organic standard, which belongs to the family of standards of the International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements. And in this way of being part of this big organization, this is the only global standalone standard for vegan organic farming, which can be applied worldwide. And there is also the Biocyclic Vegan Quality Seal, which is related to a certification, an auditing and certification system, which provides full transparency for consumers at all levels of supply chain and gives them the assurance that the products labeled in this way have been grown not only organically, but also according to vegan principles. So this includes inspection, certification, and labeling. And you see the label which has been designed and which can be used in many different languages. And there is the International Biocyclic Vegan Network. It's related to the Adolf Hobbs Society in Berlin, which I am representing, and also Dr. Eisenbach, who is one of the managers and of the board of this organization. The Adolf Hobbs Society is meant to be a non-profit organization. It is still a very, very small organization. We have no structure apart from a legal entity which has to grow now, but which has not many means yet. So everything is still based on a very voluntary and pro bono work level at the moment. But we hope that one day can change. But it is always meant to be a not-for-profit organization which wants to promote this approach of agriculture. It is named after the organic pioneer Adolf Hobbs, who in a certain period since the 1950s started already the idea of organic farming in Germany, and also was very interested in the vegetarian or vegan approach. It is the publisher of the Biocyclic Vegan Standard that I talked about, and it is also the owner of the Biocyclic Vegan Quality Seal. And it's the coordinator of the Biocyclic Vegan International Network. And this network now at the moment has different partner associations in Germany, in the Netherlands, in France, in Greece, in Cyprus, in the UK, and also in Sweden. So this is going to expand, but at the moment there are these organizations working in the idea of promoting biocyclic vegan agriculture. And there are, at the moment, there are about 50 certified farms worldwide in 13 different countries already. And there are more countries to come, not only in Europe. There's also there are farms preparing for certification in Mozambique, in Brazil, in Iceland, in Colombia, in Paraguay. And there is also one farm already. It's a vineyard in Canada. Also, Bruce Ewart, hello, you are here too. So I think we have already quite a number of farms worldwide, and this is of course growing. And I hope also today many people get an inspiration to proceed in this direction. So just we show some pictures which go very quickly from different farms worldwide without any comments. And then already I want to go over to the next step, introducing Johannes, Dr. Eisenbach, and his lecture on biocyclic humus soil as a game changer for future agriculture. So Johannes, Dr. Eisenbach, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Axel, very much for the introduction. Welcome to all. And I'm very happy to welcome you all to this webinar. And it is really nice to realize that all participants here are coming from all continents of this planet. So we will be talking about biocyclic humus soil as a game changer for future agriculture. It sounds a little bit, optimistic, but I'm sure that you will agree with this after having attended this hour. So we will be talking about refining plant-based compost substrates into what we call biocyclic humus soil. And we will talk about the benefits all along the production process until final usage in biocyclic vegan horticulture. I am connected to you from Greece, from Biocyclic Park in Kalamata in southern Peloponnese, where we have a compost plant, and most of the pictures I will show you are from here. The picture which I show now is not from here. This is a natural forest in Colombia. And just by chance, it was the forest of Jack, who is already biocyclic vegan farmer, and he starts producing biocyclic humus soil. And I was so happy to be there. And then we realized that this photo and this video is really his own forest. And I was in this forest and I found naturally built humus soil. So we are talking about something which already exists. And we as human beings just have to create the conditions to let nature work out this thing, what we call now biocyclic humus soil. I will show you this picture because of a certain reason, because I want to introduce to you or to get you aware of how nature nourishes plants. Because this is a natural environment. It's characterized by mixed culture, by the presence of several and different kinds of plants in a very different development stage, every plant. And it's characterized by its pure water capacity. It's pure water in the underground and also rivers or small kinds of, so everything what has to do with the water in such a natural ecosystem is clean. In comparison with, this is the next picture. Where we do agriculture, we have a pollution of the groundwater. We have a system which needs to be fertilized. Think about the natural ecosystem, which is resilient, which is fertile for centuries. We do not know natural ecosystems decline in fertility, except from dramatic changes of external factors. And we know that wherever humans do agriculture, we have to face an initially not visible, and after some decades or centuries of intensive agricultural activities, we have to do with a dramatic loss in soil fertility. And this results in landscapes like this. This could be a landscape which some centuries ago was fertile. Think about Mesopotamia, so which is now Iraq, which is considered to be the Garden Eden on Earth, which was a fertile green zone of agricultural production, and now is a desert. So it seems that we do something which leads a natural ecosystem to something which is not desirable. And this has to do with a very, very basic misunderstanding. We have to know that in natural ecosystems, plants absorb water in a totally independent way from the absorption of nutrients. Nutrients intake is not connected to water intake. Water intake is necessary for every organism living on Earth, also for plants, for every kind of metabolism, but the plants do not absorb water in order to take nutrients. This is done in an active manner as a function of the interaction and symbiosis with the soil microbiome. So we have to know that the plant is able to communicate with soil organisms, which are specialized in every kind of nutrient degradation of nutrients, making nutrients available. And their communication is connected to signals which plants send out to the living organisms in the form of root acids or liquid carbon or enzymes to stimulate and to activate highly specialized microorganisms like azotobacilli, mycorrhiza, extracellular organelles, and so on and so on. I tried to explain you that with the next picture. This is a picture showing how fertilization is going on. So how did we come to the idea of fertilization? The problem of declining soil fertility did not begin some decades ago. It dates many centuries and probably many thousand years ago, when mankind decided to settle and not to be any more nomads. These people had together with them some animals. And when they decided to settle on a certain location, they had their animals with them. And this was probably the first problem of recycling or so, because suddenly they had manure on a certain place, which was scattered before when they were working from one place to another. It was scattered in the landscape. But now they had it on a certain place. And they observed that where they put the manure close to those plants they wanted to grow for them for food, these plants grew quicker and better. And this was the first basic misunderstanding, because of course it's correct, they grew better, but under the surface there took something place which was not visible and which could not be seen very easily, but it was the first step to soil degradation. And I will explain you why. Look at the picture here. Either you put NPK, chemical fertilizer, or you put animal manure as organic substance. You give a certain amount of nutrients in a water-soluble form to the plant. So whatever is dissolved in the water is absorbed by the plant. The plant does not have any mechanism to select what they take together with the water. Even if you pour ink in the water, the plants will get blue. So by doing that, the plant takes a lot of nutrients inside, and it is okay. If we give a lot of fertilizer, plants grow. If we do less fertilizer, we see that the plant maybe has some deficiency. Remember that in natural ecosystems, there are no deficiencies. Remember that in natural ecosystems, there are growing on the same soil small plants, big plants, trees, flowering plants, fruiting plants, herbs, grass. And every plant has a very specific demand in nutrients. How is it possible that in a natural ecosystem, all these plants can grow together without deficiencies? So let's have a look what happens in a natural plant nutrition situation. We have sunlight and CO2 being collected by the plants through photosynthesis, but there are no fertilizers. Nobody is going through a natural ecosystem in the night and throwing NPK fertilizer. And there is no organic fertilizer available, but there is water. And there are specialized bacteria, which are called Azotobacter, which are specialized in collecting, in assimilating nitrogen from the air. And they produce nitrogen combinations which can be absorbed by the plants. So this is the miracle of natural plant nutrition, because nitrogen is an essential nutrient. It is necessary to grow, to build proteins. And so it is not coming from somewhere in the soil. It's the biggest part of nitrogen is coming from the air through these nitrogen collecting microbes. So these microbes need energy in order to do their work. This is the difficulty. And they get energy not from the sunlight, because they're working in the soil. There is no sunlight. Sunlight can be collected by the plants. They are the best sun collectors we have on Earth. So a very recent research showed that the carbohydrates, which are produced by plants through photosynthesis, intaking CO2 and the energy and water, is not only used to build up the tissue of plants and to build fruits and leaves and roots, but up to 50% of these carbohydrates are distributed through the root system into the soil in the form of sugar, in the form of liquid carbon, as Christine Jones, a soil researcher from Australia, which is professor in the States and has an institute there. She is talking about the liquid carbon path. So what is this liquid carbon? It's a sugar-like substances which are used by these nitrogen-fixing bacteria to as an energy resource. So they need this energy in order to do their work with the nitrogen. Imagine how many energy is bound in nitrogen fertilizer. Maybe some of you remember the explosion in Beirut in Lebanon. some years ago, this was a nitrogen fertilizer depot. Remember that after First World War I, there were deposits of dynamite, and they have been turned into fertilizer. This was the beginning of chemical fertilization in agriculture. So there is a big energy bound in these substances, and thus also the microbes need. So I jump now to another kind of picture showing more or less the same, but I will reduce the complexity of this process to some circles, which are the circle of nitrogen and carbon and the circle of water and energy. And we can state a very progressive sentence by saying that plants can nourish themselves from the air, because plants are in the center of these circles, and they are the only organisms on Earth that are able to be in air and in the soil. They communicate with all four elements, with energy, sunlight, water, soil, and air. No other organism is able to do that. Either they are living in the water or in the air, on the soil, but the plants are in everything. And therefore, by being the center of these circles, they create, as a byproduct, fertile soils. And this is called natural or plant-induced soil generation. And if you put all these circles together, we come close to understand what Hans-Peter Rusch, who is the founder of Bioland, the first association or one of the first organic farmers associations in Europe, expressed by stating the circle of living substance. And being the plant itself in the center of this circle, we can also express this circle of living substance with a Greek word consisting of the word for life, which is bios, and for cycle, which is kyklos. And this is what has born the word, the expression of biocyclic vegan agriculture. And this is what we mean by that. And let me give you a definition of the objective of biocyclic vegan agriculture in a very specialized form, but very, very general at the same time. So biocyclic vegan agriculture is the production of physiologically healthy food through a closed circle of plant-based biomass without the deviation through the stomach of animals, under conditions which result into the re-establishment of the natural soil-generating mechanisms, aiming at a sustainable increase of soil fertility. We can also express the same with very simple words. We can say from healthy soils through healthy plants to human health, because we depend on healthy soils. And we do not depend, or it is catastrophic if we depend on empty soils or on poor soils. Therefore, working with soils, Adolf Hobbes, who laid down many decades ago the principle of biocyclic, what we now call biocyclic vegan agriculture, many times often talked about healing nature and humans by working in favor of soils. So this was a kind of introduction, and now we will step into humus soil production, and you will understand afterwards what all these things have to do in common. We said that biocyclic vegan agriculture is a way through a closed circle of plant-based biomass. So how can we close plant-based biomass? This can be done on 4 levels. One level is the operational level. We can incorporate harvest residues like straw, prunings, grass, cut and carry, and so on. And another level is on a local level. So we can recycle biomass of plant origin and waste material from food industry, from green cuttings, from sawdust, bamboo, leaves, pumices, fungi substrates, and so on. These are already materials which are kind of concentrated on a certain location. Therefore, we have to find these sources of raw material on a local level. This picture is olive pomace coming out from olive mill. Then we have to look on a regional level using ready compost from other areas with a biomass surplus. There are areas which have a big need in organic matter and other areas which produce very easily a surplus in biomass. So we can connect these regions to each other to get an equilibrium. And we have to look at the global level using biomass from aquatic and maritime ecosystems. Because a big portion of nutrients used by humans come to the oceans at the end. And the maritime ecosystem is a completely different ecosystem from the terrestrial ecosystem. And since some substances come from the terrestrial ecosystem into the maritime ecosystem, the oceans give it back to the land in form of algae or in other forms. Maybe you have seen on the beaches big stems of wood or so on. So what does not belong to the maritime ecosystem is given back to the land. So we have to include this cycle also. And I saw in the chat before, there was a question about human excrements. This would be the ideal thing, but it has to be the last, because there we have a lot of problems which we have to solve before we can really close the circle perfectly. So by using these materials, we can make compost. And I will show you some pictures, and I will show you this slide twice. We just start with a degradation process, which is done by insects, bacteria, and fungi. And their work is to decompose plant material, which was before living material. Some of these degradation specialists we have everywhere, even on fruits or vegetables. And sometimes they start working a little bit earlier than we want, because this means mold or getting rotten something on the tree. So they are our friends in the soil, but they are not our friends when they are working more quicker than we do. So the next. So the first thing we have to do in order to produce compost is to put together all these ingredients. The more different ingredients we use, the better it is. And we have to mix them, because only by adding air and moisture we can initiate the process, or we can boost the process of degradation, because under certain conditions, these microorganisms, they feel perfectly and they start to develop very rapidly. And this leads to high temperature. The temperature in a compost plant is not caused by outside temperature, but by microbial degradation processes. So I'm very often asked, will be the same in cool countries or in hot countries or in the tropic? I can tell you this is the same everywhere on this planet. And it doesn't have anything to do with the outside temperature. This morning we measured 72 centigrade. I forgot to take a picture of that. And it's really difficult to keep your hands in this material. And even in this windrow, it is such a high temperature. So then we come to another phase, which is called the upgrading phase. After being completed the rapid growth of degrading microorganisms that take over some other microorganisms, in between there is a phase which is dominated by fungi. And so we have a lot of specialized organisms doing their work in a compost. And it starts to ripen. During this ripening process, we have to take some care for keeping moist the material or for protecting it from too much rainfall, because at this stage, it is like a sponge and it becomes very easily oversaturated with water. And we have to be careful. Therefore, we cover. You will find these kind of covers all over the world where is composting done, because it is semi-permeable, so it can breathe, but it protects the material from too much water and also from sunlight, because we have to know that all microorganisms connected to the soil are UV sensitive. This is the reason why plants, which rely on the existence of soil-borne microorganisms, try to protect them against sunlight by creating a permanent green coverage or with leaves or so on. So nature always tries not to expose the soil to sunlight. And this is one thing we do not imitate in agriculture. We have huge periods, long periods, where we expose the soil to sunlight, and we shouldn't. So during this process, we have to measure temperature, CO2 content. This is not because we want to know, it is not so interesting how many CO2 is inside the windrow, but we have to know if there is a lack of oxygen. And this is connected to the CO2, which is very easy to measure. Here we have a picture of an equipment which we think is the best one, because there are very, very different techniques to produce compost. You will find huge machines which are turning over piles of 3 meters, 4 meters, self-driven, huge machines. So everything is possible to use, but we have to optimize the process. And the process is only optimized if we have aerobic procedures. And we have to add a lot of oxygen and water in order to get the process short and intense. All these pictures are from Greece, from Kalamata. And then we come to a substrate or to a compost, which is a mixture of decomposed organic matter. And normally it is already sold in the market as compost. And due to some very special conditions we lived some decades ago, we came to the idea to plant on a ripe compost directly plants. So this is considered to be crazy because nobody does that. And just this crazy idea led us to what we call now humus soil, because we realized that after a certain stage of ripeness, there came out some small herbs and grasses were growing on this material. So I thought it is possible. What herbs can do, we can do also with vegetables. And we start planting. And look some pictures of planted compost. And then after some years of planting, we realized that the material doesn't shrink anymore. Everybody who has some experience with composting knows that the material will get always smaller and smaller. But this stopped after a while. And this is called the carbon stabilization phase, this is the beginning of the plant-induced biocyclic soil generation. So it is a kind of soiling which takes place after about 4 to 5 years. Look what the plants are doing. And no fertilizer used, never. Even after 4 years, even after 5 years, the plants get bigger and bigger. This is a Lolo Bianco salad. I don't know if he is already here in the audience. He's a journalist of The Guardian. So this is another plantation with here in Kalamata with Hokkaido. We try to imitate nature by always adopting mixed culture. We have several stages of ripeness always together. This picture has been taken 3 days ago here in Kalamata. And now I show you again this initial picture. And we came already through degradation and structuring to the stabilization, where we have ready compost, and the stage where we can put plants into the compost, we have to define a new ripeness stage, and we call it phytoponic substrate compost. Phytoponic is derived from the Greek word of plant, phytoponic like aquaponic, so it is a plant-based compost that can be planted. And this is the substrate where we start producing humus soil, because to come to phytoponic substrate is a matter of optimization of the composting process, which should be ready after 6-7 months. Then we can start planting on it. And after that, we have a period of about 4 years in front of us in order to receive ready biocyclic humus soil. And I try to avoid to talk about humus soil production because we do not produce it really. We just create the conditions which are similar to the conditions of natural ecosystems in order to let plants create their soil. And their soil is not any more compost, their soil is humus soil. Look what the plant does in humus soil. The root system is 4 times bigger than in normal agricultural soil. So are the plants. This is a cabbage. We observe a gigantic increase in size of plants which are growing after 5, 4, 6, 7 years in humus soil. The oldest windrow we have here in Kalamata is 23 years old. For 20 years, it is cultivated permanently with vegetables. The yields are increasing year by year. The specific weight of the material is increasing year by year. This is normally it's amaranth, if somebody knows it. It's a small herb. This is more than 2 meters high. Johannes, which is depicted there, is by himself 2 meters. So we started analyzing this phenomenon because this was not explainable very easily and anymore by what we learned at agricultural schools. So we had, this is a picture of the analyze. So I cannot tell you every detail now, but there were very, very strange characteristics. Just to mention, very low electrical conductivity combined with a very high content of nutrients. And all of a sudden, and not explainable, combined with a very high cation exchange rate. which is an indicator for the availability of these nutrients for plants. But without leaching, in the depletion or the leaching test resulted in almost nothing in the water. So it is free of nutrients. So this was completely strange, and we tried to understand what could have happened in this material. And we came to the conclusion that it seems to be a function of carbon, which we are observing. Have in mind that carbon as an element in nature occurs in very different forms. Think about diamond. It's a form of carbon. Graphite is a form of carbon. Carbon is carbon. So these are very, very dense structures of this element. So carbon in nature tends to create structures. And there is one structure described as amorph precrystalline grid structure. And we believe that this is probably the form which has been created in humus soil. Have a look here on the leaching water of different windrows of totally different age. Number one is windrow number 1, which is 20 years old. 17 is a windrow which has been planted for 2 or 3 years. And 26 is a windrow just 3 weeks old. You see from the color that probably there are substances inside. This is another sample taking. And some of this leaching is containing a lot of nutrients and some is nothing. And what is called here 10B is a 10-year-old humus soil. So these are the criteria we have defined in order to understand if a material has already the characteristics of biocyclic humus soil. So I told you already some of these characteristics. Another one is a very narrow CN ratio. The ratio between carbon and nitrogen is under 10. And a very high water capacity. More than 80% of its weight can be bound as water in humus soil. And we have a measurable fertilizing effect even on seedlings, because the laboratory did also some tests on the seedling, on the capability of the material to nourish seedlings. And if you have too much nutrients, then you will not get a good result. Another characteristic is that humus soil is totally odorless and a totally clear filtrate, as I showed you before. Why is it odorless? It's very easy to understand, because all degrading processes are over. There is no degrading anymore. This has been done in the phases before. In humus soil, we have a stabilization, a carbon stabilization process, which leads probably to this kind of carbon grid, which does not does not allow anymore water molecules to penetrate and to leach nutrients. And on the other side, we have the impression that these carbon structures, which have still to be analyzed by many means, are the ideal housing conditions for nitrogen-fixing bacteria, because this carbon does not come from the degradation of organic matter. We know from fields where we put manure or we put ripe compost that we have to put it every year again. After 1 or 2 years, the material is gone. Every farmer can confirm that. But here we have to do with a form of carbon which comes from the air, what I told you at the beginning is that the liquid carbon, which is coming from as a carbohydrate through the plants and is distributed to the microbes, is what is used for energy providing to the nitrogen fixing bacteria, and not only. And the rest of these very, very, very small molecules are a kind of remainder in the soil and is not acknowledged anymore as a nutrient base for other degradation processes. So these are pictures from our nursery where we grow small plants, seedlings in the same substrate, which gives us also the big trees and the big plants. Look here, artichoke. Just to give you some impressions of vegetables which were growing in humus soil, a salad of 2 kilograms. It's nice, but it doesn't suit in any fridge anymore. Or even in, you can use humus soil on open field, in greenhouses. Banana growing in Crete, extremely good when they are planted into humus soil. And I have to make a kind of summary in order to get all these things structured. So plants which grow on phytoponic compost are forced in a sense to stimulate their active nutrient intake mechanisms as a degree of stabilization of the substrate, which defines the refinement stage increases. So thus they function as a carbon pump, liquid carbon, as Christian Jones said, and initiate the natural process of soil building. During this process, big amounts of formerly atmospheric carbon are accumulated in the soil, where it remains over centuries, in opposite to using compost or planting forests, where we have a CO2 sequestration with a climate effect, but it's not sure that it is for so long. So plants which grow in phytoponic compost use a bigger percentage of their genetic potential as the refinement stage proceeds, which results in an unusual shape, extraordinary size, and a gigantic root system, a better immune system, a prolonged vegetation period, and in better yields. So cultivated plants which grow in biocyclic humus soil show in all development stages a behavior similar to wild plants. The second is the positive effects of the use of biocyclic humus soil in agriculture. If the inorganic components of the biomass grown during the vegetation period is reallocated in the cultivated area, a supplementary fertilizing is not necessary. We never used fertilizers here in Kalamata. Nitrogen, essential for plant growth, originates to a major extent from the atmosphere, where it is 78%, due to symbiotic processes in the rhizosphere. And the carbon structures which are built during the process of plant-induced soil generation cannot be identified anymore by analytics as organic substance. So it's a kind of non-organic carbon. And they are responsible for the fact that biocyclic humus soil shows completely different characteristics in comparison with the initial material. And the most important characteristic of these structures, according to what we presently know, seems to be the fact that they protect nutrient-containing complexes from being leached, whereas symbiotic processing around the root system extremely benefit from biocyclic humus soil. Because of that, biocyclic humus soil can be applied without any quantity limit in all sectors of agriculture, from nurseries up to large-scale crop production. There is no danger of groundwater pollution by using biocyclic humus soil. So due to the above described reasons, yields from plant which go on biocyclic humus soil range from 30 to 150% higher than those usually observed in agriculture. This has been proven first time by an by research done in the Athens University of Agriculture. And it was a trial between sweet potato and industrial tomatoes. And I just show you very quickly the site where the trial was done on the trial field of Agricultural University in Athens. And the result was so astonishing that nobody could believe it before. Biocyclic humus soil resulted in 2.5 times higher yields than NPK, so chemical fertilizing. And it is a mathematically strong correlation between the use of biocyclic humus soil and the yield. Same observations have been found in a totally different approach, a trial at university in Humboldt University in Berlin. And this was a kind of grass growing in pots, and the dark blue bars symbolize the yield of biocyclic humus soil pots. And you see from the second cutting of the grass, biocyclic humus soil has a tremendous difference to all other variants. So let's make a small summary. Biocyclic humus soil, a game changer. Why? Biocyclic humus soil is a substrate that restores and maintains permanent soil fertility, probably for centuries. Look at terra preta, which is something quite similar. Maybe we can discuss it in the discussion. Second, it contributes positively to the environment and enriches soil with huge amounts of carbon lost through centuries of so-called cultivation techniques. Third, it allows growing vegetables even in water protection areas because there is no leaching. Fourth, it increases fruit size, yields, and taste. Everybody who eats these products can confirm that. Fifth, it makes farmers independent from buying fertilizers. Think about that after this session. Six, it boosts nutrients, vitamins, antioxidants, and other bioactive ingredients. This is what Adolf Hupp said, through healthy plants and healthy soil to human health. And it reestablishes symbiosis-based peace and harmony with nature, in soil, and the soil with humans. But this is a separate chapter. So taking into consideration all that, we come to the conclusion that we need huge quantities of biocyclic humus soil in order to solve many urgent problems of agriculture, maybe even all. So we have to create units which produce a high quality initial, what we call phytoponic substrate, in order to be able to refine this substrate into humus soil. And therefore, we think about, this is Biocyclic Park introduction. Okay, we make also seminars here. We have to think about three conditions that have to be fulfilled to generate biocyclic humus soil. The first is the complete absence of water-soluble neutral salts. So no fertilizing in no form is necessary. The cultivation of as much as possible species at the same time, which is called mixed culture or even permaculture, and if possible, a permanent coverage of the surface of the soil, which is the deepest sense of permaculture. This should not be a question mark, this is a bracket. So, but we need something which our humankind does not have anymore these times. We need time for that. We need up to 60 months, according to our observations. And therefore, the fulfillment of these preconditions faces economic restrictions which normally cannot be overcome by compost plants, because they have to produce a material which is sold very quickly in order to get the place ready to produce new quantities. So therefore, we need the cooperation between compost plants and what we call refinement partners, which are farmers and horticultural units. And what we really need is a worldwide fertility alliance in combination with a new circular economy simultaneously on a local and a global level. So, according to our opinion, the initial step has to be done by as many as possible humus soil advocates. These are people who maybe are willing to enhance the production of humus soil, even in an economic way. We need a mass production of phytoponic substrate as the base for a humus soil. So we need a network, a dense network of composting units, of licensed composting units who meet the requirements for phytoponic compost. We call them incubators. And we need the refinement of phytoponic substrate into biocyclic humus soil by refinement partners, and they are called refiners. So the production of high quality nutrient-rich food contributing to the protection of the environment and climate change, as well as restoring and maintaining healthy circuits. So this is again what other folks meant with these things. And all this together led us to the idea to found the International Biocyclic Humus Soil Initiative. And as part of this initiative, we found recently the Terra Plena Fund, which maybe we have the opportunity to talk a little bit later, but I just will give you some very, very short information on that. So this is the picture which shows the soil curators or the soil advocates we need in order to make this thing happen. And here again, the actors of this initiative. Here is the soil curator, individuals or enterprises, investors, the incubators, licensed phytoponic composting units, the refiners, licensed biocyclic vegan, certified agriculture and horticultural operations. And let me tell you that the conditions we have to meet in order to produce biocyclic humus soil are exactly the requirements of the biocyclic vegan standard. And then we have a fourth player in the whole initiative, which are the scientific research institutions and non-for-profit environmental organizations, which are the alliance members, which will supervise and control the whole process. This is a humus node, just a picture, and this is the contract or the agreement between a compost plant and a refiner in order to produce humus soil by growing vegetables. Let me show, and we come to the end of the presentation, some pictures recently shot here in Kalamata some days ago, where we have the phytoponic substrate to be transferred from the compost plant to refinement places. Here, this was just yesterday, a very happy landowner who wants to create a refinement unit. This is another very nice example of how to place the phytoponic substrate in order to grow in it. And here you see Stefan, who is also here and will answer your questions. He's the manager of the Terra Plena Fund by planting this morning tomatoes into phytoponic substrate. This is a picture which shows us the Terra Plena Fund at one glance. I think I don't have any more the time to be in detail on that, but it shows you that the initial incentive given by a soil curator results in the regeneration of soils, and with benefits for all participants, and not at least benefiting nature. And I will thank you for your attention and your patience, listening to my presentation by a picture which we took at Biofach in Nuremberg this year, where we had the common stand with Förderkreis and Biocyclic Vegan International and Terra Plena Fund. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you will give me the opportunity to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eisenbach, for this very rich presentation and lecture you gave. I think probably many of the information are new to the audience. Some of them are already familiar with some of these questions. I mean, when I look at the chat, there were a number of questions which partly have already been responded to. But when we go back to some of the fundamental questions, which always go about what are the materials for the compost, the organic mass. You talked about it can also come from the sea, it can come from plant-based materials. So there was one question if also we can use human excrements. That was one question. And combined to this also, can we also use animal excrements, for instance? We know we talk about biocyclic vegan farming, but can animal excrements be used as well? And if I add to this, there is some doubt about the quality of the material which we get from the outside. If, so, for instance, we get it from the sea, the question is also if there are some materials in there which are harmful to the soil, harmful to the plants. There can be heavy metals, for instance, minerals which are not good for the soil in the sea, residues from plastics, and so the question is, when you use the material for the compost and the humus soil, can you take anything? Will it be transformed through a magic process that it becomes healthy and natural soil? Or which precautions do you have to take that you really get the soil you want? And especially also from the aspect if animal excrements can be used, if it's not in vegan farming, for instance, and if human excrements can be used, well, all the material which is not definitely organic, which is not definitely clean in the way we want it to be.
Okay, Axel, thank you very much for this, for summarizing this complex of questions. Of course, we have to be very, very careful which kind of raw material we use. The first question is animal manure. Can we use animal manure? So exactly, I can tell you that we should avoid to use it. I would say it is really counterproductive, because have in mind that in animal manure, there is a big portion of water-soluble nutrients. And what happens, and I did not mention that in my presentation, what happens to a plant which is nourished by water-soluble nutritional elements is that it takes it in, the plant understands that it is saturated with these elements, and it gets lazy pumping carbon into the soil. And that is what is necessary to keep soil activity high, to keep soil fertile, and to create soil. We have different kind of soils. Some are suitable to agricultural production and some are not so much. But if we have a fertile soil or an unfertile soil, this depends on the activity of plants and not of the rocks and the minerals in the soil. So it is counterproductive if we give animal fertilizers, because they contain exactly what makes plants lazy. Second, the same would be with not good, not well prepared excrements of humans. I already mentioned that it should not be used because they are full of antibiotica, they're full of heavy metals. So be careful. This has to be analyzed. This should be the rest. This should be the last step we have to go. but we have it keep it in mind because everything has to be recycled. Another question was heavy metals. Yes, even in the so-called biodegradable rubbish, which is collected by cities and authorities, can contain huge amounts of heavy metals. So this has to be analyzed. The separation has to be done very, very carefully and consciously. So we have to be very careful by using this. Therefore, we are talking about a network of licensed compost plants. We cannot just say, okay, there is compost. Oh, good. We make now humus soil of it. We could make it. It could be harmful. So they have to prove that they are able to make a separation of inputs, so that we are sure that it is not contaminated. There is one form of contamination we have to make a compromise because it is not possible to wait for 100% organically produced raw materials. If we wait to get this would be ideal, and here in Kalamata we are happy to have at least 2 or 3 of these materials totally organic, but it is not possible to get the whole thing running when we wait for that. So we have to use also the raw material which originates sometimes from conventional farming. So I hope I met every aspect of the questions.
There was one aspect maybe which also comes very often, that of course you said when you use animal manure, it contains also nutrients and it makes the plants lazy. But if you compost it, then then it can probably just, if you don't have the vegan aspect, it can also be composted, and then it can also be transformed into humus soil. Or is there any other reason for not using animal manure in this case?
It makes it more difficult. It prolongs the process. And another thing is that in nowadays animal manure, which is coming from big animal breeders, we have a high concentration of antibiotica. Antibiotica are used not because the animals are ill, but they are used before, how do you say this, preventionally. And in huge concentrations. And antibiotica means it is against bacteria, it's against life. So they destroy part of the soil-borne microorganisms. And we have a huge problem by using animal manure from these sources.
So there were some more questions about irrigation, the irrigation system, also especially in dry season, and also how to protect the hypes or the windrows in dry season, and also when you use the biomass, is it used fresh or in dry matter, and what kind of combination do you have there? So it's a question of irrigation and of the proportion of biomass for the making of the compost.
Okay, I understand. Irrigation is necessary even in areas with high perception, because in the first stage of ripeness, the bacterial, the microbial activity, also the fungi which are inside, they exhaust a big quantity of humidity. So we have to add water during the first stage. Then we have to be very careful by adding water. It has to be measured so that it's not too moist and not too dry. Therefore, we need also the covering, which I told you. These fleeces are necessary in order to cope with this problem. The materials themselves can be dry or wet. What is very essential is the CN ratio. So look, for example, straw has a big content in carbon. It's the CN ratio is 50:1, or freshly cut grass is 7:1. So you have to find a combination in order to get 30:1, which is the rule for composting. The mixture of all materials together should result in the CN ratio of 30:1. then you have the ideal preconditions of aeration and the best mixture for the degradation specialized microbes.
One more question for the compost. I just see, what about weeds? Weeds is always an issue, that you have the seeds of the weeds coming out again, and this is what you probably do not want to have.
Look, this is a very nice question, because first of all, if we have weeds, we want to get rid of them, then we could easily put this into the compost. A temperature of 72 centigrade, or let's say a temperature more than 55 centigrade over 6 weeks, you can imagine there will be nothing left anymore. So it's a kind of sterilization, it's a kind of pasteurization, it's a degradation, completely degradation of organic matter. So even very, very difficult weeds can be destroyed by this process. When we have the phytoponic substrate, then we have another problem, because there are no temperatures anymore. So the weeds can easily penetrate the material and can come into the material. Therefore, we have to make several practices like weeding or covering. The best method against weeds are total soil coverage. So if you have a perfect system of mixed culture, you probably won't have any problems with weeds. But if you don't produce very intensively, and by chance it's getting full of weeds, don't worry. Weeds are plants. Plants are carbon pumps. So they do the same thing as the vegetables we want to grow in order to sell them. If we don't want to sell something, we need the weeds. So it's not such a big problem. And after having weeds into the material, you have to sieve it. If you want to sell it somewhere, or you give it to a refiner, of course, you should not give him any weed-containing material. But there are several techniques we can get rid of them very easily without using any chemical or so weeds. It's not necessary.
There is one more technical question about saline soil. So when it's very salty, and the water of the soil water quality, does this affect the final compost when there's too much salt in the water which is there in the soil?
Yes, this can, of course, it is a negative for the process. If you use, for example, algae from the seaweed, so it can be very salty. So this should be washed out before adding to the compost. On the other hand, if you use phytoponic substrate or biocyclic humus soil on salty soils, it doesn't matter at all, because actually the plants do not need the underground soil. They are growing into the substrate, and you can even grow on grow on contaminated soils. You can even grow on beton or asphalt. So if you have biocyclic humus soil, you can grow everywhere, even in pots, even in urban farming. You can grow vegetables on your roof, and it is a totally natural process. So it's a material which can be which offers a huge opportunity for everything you can imagine.
There was another question about the weeds and about, I don't understand the word, pyrrolizidine alkaloids in some weeds. So there must be some substances in weeds which probably are dangerous or so. What about this?
Look, all these substances are decomposed. Look, for example, olive pomace contains a huge amount of antioxidants, of polyphenols. The polyphenols are considered to be healthy substances for human nutrition, but in the concentration we have it in olive pomace, it can kill every kind of plants. So take 10 liters of olive pomace to a plant, it will disappear within 2 months. So it is a question of quantity, and be sure that even poisonous weeds or poisonous plants will be decomposed as every kind of plant, and at the end there is nothing left from the original plant.
Some more question for the material, just an example, because you talk about all the different plant material. Can use one in the palm growing. Can you use pulverized palm fronds and other parts of the palm tree as source of phytoponic substrate?
Yes, why not? If you shredder it properly, you can use every plant which was growing can be a raw material for compost.
There's another question, interesting, if we come on the economic level. What is the economic advantage with respect to production humus soil against the cost of fertilizer? Have you made any experience in this cost comparison?
Yes, it's also a question which has to do with the value of humus soil at the end, because by producing or generating humus soil, the economic value of this material does not represent its actual value, because if you have humus soil, it's something similar to what we observe with terra preta in the Amazonian region and in Brazil, which has been discovered, and they found that it is fertile even after 400 years. So I can prove personally that it is fertile at least 23 years, because this is the oldest windrow we have, but it would be very strange if it would not keep on the next decades. So when you think, let's take only 20 years, how many fertilizers you use for a land where you grow vegetables, for example, and add the value of this fertilizer, it would be much, much more than the value of humus soil. So if this becomes obvious, and every refiner is a practitioner, is a farmer who uses humus soil, and he will prove the benefits of phytoponic substrates getting humus soil. So he is an ambassador by himself. His neighbors will see the results. They will ask. So the value will increase automatically because it will be obvious that the benefits are really striking. And therefore, it is very difficult to say what is the real value of humus soil, because once you have humus soil, biocyclic humus soil, you don't need any more fertilizers. Don't tell it too loud, but it is like that.
Another question, any clear evidence that the species of plants on biocyclic humus soil have more resistance? You talked about this, but what about
Yes.
the evidence for this?
Yes, the evidence is that we, more or less, we don't have any plant protection problems. This refers to fungi diseases and bacterial diseases we don't have. There is a very interesting observation when you grow salads on biocyclic humus soil, even if the leaves of the salad are direct on the material, you will see that they are not rotten, which is normally not the case if you grow on normal soil, or even if you grow on a very unripe material. Then it will be rotten because the bacteria in the material will not differentiate between what is inside and what is on top of the material. In humus soil, all these processes have been overcome. It is a peaceful process. It is only upgrading. So there are no microorganisms which are dependent on the destruction of a salad leaf, for example. So we don't have any fungi problems. What we cannot avoid are insect problems, because insects are normally flying, or they are coming from outside our field, and there we have to take some protection measures. But what is soil-borne diseases, we don't know anymore, and we don't have any fungi problems. Very, very little.
Thank you. Another question, in a very wide expanse of land with many palms, can the new planting kind of new planting holes have the phytoponic substrate, and the palm planted and phytoponic substrate added every year in the different holes for 4 years or something like that. So the question is how you can use this humus soil on a large scale, and especially when you plant trees.
Yeah, this is a very good final usage of biocyclic humus soil, because the tree will root in the system. It takes it starts growing as it would be in a natural ecosystem, and when it comes through the area which is filled up with humus soil and goes into the underground, it is already very, very strong, and it takes from the rest of the soil only what it needs, maybe in water or some microelements. And another thing is that by activating soil life, please keep this in mind, by activating soil life through the giving energy, the plant gives the energy to soil life to be active. The specialists of the soil life can dissolve, can make available all kinds of nutrients or microelements in the soil. There is more or less no soil on Earth that which is not able to nourish plants efficiently. What is not available everywhere is the soil life. So if we have soil life, then we can use more or less every kind of soil. And in order to have soil life, you need something like biocyclic humus soil, but in combination with other conditions like temperature, rainfall, water availability. These are, of course, restricting factors. But if they are available, if they are in an optimum, by letting plants produce their soil and nourishing their soil life, there is almost no unsuitable soil.
Maybe just to understand, or if the question was in this direction, this makes clear that it is better to put ripe, mature humus soil into the plant holes and not the compost, and to let it be refined into humus soil during the growth of the tree. So it's better to first make humus soil in the way you described it, and then use the finished humus soil. Yeah,
for planting trees, it is correct to use the ready humus soil. For cultivating short-term cultivations like vegetables, you can use the phytoponic substrate in order to induce the process of getting humus soil.
There was one interesting question also about the plants. You showed the big cabbages and all the big vegetables. The question is, if the plants increase in size, does not that come at the expense of nutritional value? It seems nutritionally smaller plants are better. This is one, and the other part of the question, someone else added to this, also to be competitive and address the consumer's needs, we need desired size of final produce. So if it overgrows at a certain point, it becomes a negative trait. So you have very big and you say very, very good vegetables, but if they are too big, they maybe are not as nutritious as smaller ones are, and they are a bad feature on the market.
Very interesting question. We had this morning with our participants of the seminar. We had exactly this question. So first, the reason why the plants are growing so big is not that they are over-fertilized. You are right. If you think of over-fertilizing, you get big plants, but they are not. They do not content. They do not have the nutritional content. But here is the opposite. They are full of nutrients. And they grow because they have access, unlimited access to all nutrients they need. And they decide, the plants itself decides what it needs by sending out the signals to the microorganisms. Now I need kalium, now I need magnesium, now I need a huge amount of nitrogen. This is the command of the process, is the plant itself. So if these signals are responded positively by the soil life, the plant feels in a very luxury condition, and it doesn't feel getting older. It wants to grow, it wants to flower, it wants to produce fruits, I really can tell you that the only factor which stops growing the plants on humus soil is weather or frost or whatever. Or you just have to cut it or so. But by themselves, they would just continue to grow because they feel young enough for this process. So therefore, the nutritional content is very, very high, and it's also visible. It's you can feel it when you eat them. We had last year we had red beetroot,
yeah.
yes, of 3 kilograms. So one of our workers took it with him at home, and his mother cooked it. And everybody was awaiting that it is hard and woody inside and without taste and so on. And I never talked with him about food, never occurred. And the next day he came back and he said, "What was this beetroot?" My mother was totally astonished because it was soft until this last centimeter and it had a taste. We never had a beetroot like that. So this is an example of what goes on if a plant has access to what it really needs. And this is what I meant before, that the genetical potential of a plant is used better if it grows in such a natural way. It is almost impossible to give neutral elements through water. You know, this is aquaculture. Hydroponics is the exact opposite of what we do. This is adding nutrients through the water. And this is a high philosophy and a high science, and it is very difficult. It's high technology, but it is almost impossible to give really the plants what they really would want. So we didn't know what plants can do. This is the first time we see what these plants are able to do.
And maybe if we come to the question for the market, if we have such a quality of vegetables, the customer, the consumers, they will get used to having different sizes of fruits and vegetables, and maybe they also accept this because if the quality is so fantastic, they will can be educated. I think.
I have an example to tell you. We have here on our compost plant already a cooperation with an organic farmer. These are two brothers coming from another city. They settled here in Kalamata in order to grow on biocyclic humus soil and phytoponic substrate. And they sell their products on the open air market in Kalamata. They are organic certified and biocyclic vegan certified, and they have the label also on their stand. And now they realize that people come there, they want their products, they sell first, they sell out first of all others, and they already feel the strong demand which is created just by the quality of the fruits and the vegetables themselves. So we have a strong advocate by growing on this material. These are the plants themselves. Even if all marketing measures fail, the taste and the plant, the products themselves talk to the consumer. And it's just a matter of time that this will be acknowledged by others, by other marketing partners too.
I see we have run out of time. There's maybe just one conclusion also for the, because there came another question about the size of the fruits. This is rather something which applies to vegetables and fruits that you grow direct on humus soil. If you talk about oranges, avocados, mangoes or so, they probably won't grow that big if you use humus soil. Because that can be also an aspect where you say, oh, you don't want to have the big ones. The smaller ones are the more luxurious ones, for mangoes. That was the question here. So probably this big size, does it apply to trees also, to fruit trees, or is it just more on vegetables?
Look, a tree reacts much slower as a vegetable to what it finds in the soil. It takes, sometimes it takes years that we see the reaction of a tree. And most of the trees which are now organic certified and even biocyclic vegan certified have not grown in humus soil. So I cannot answer this question at the moment. most probably, if we have trees which grew from the very beginning in such an environment, in such a milieu, probably they will produce maybe not bigger but more fruits, for example. It depends on the fruit tree in which kind it reacts on this availability of nutrients and natural conditions.
Okay, so we have come, I think, to the end of our discussion. It could go on for hours and hours, and I hope and I'm sure we will have another opportunity to come together again. There's maybe one question which could be very interesting, because it also gives maybe also a perspective, a final perspective, and to close with. And this is a question: how many years can the humus soil remain potent? Can it rebuild itself without adding additional humus? So it's a question of the lifetime of fertility of the humus soil. This could be an interesting closing answer.
Yeah, thank you very much also for this question. Once you came to the stage of humus soil, this material will remain stabilized. It will not lose its capability because the main component are these new stabilized carbon structures. Even if it fell dry, it can be reactivated very quickly. We observed that humus soil packed into plastic bags after some weeks or months maybe has lost its immediate effect on growing very quickly, because the nitrogen fixing bacteria are not nourished for a time where the humus soil is packed into a plastic bag. There are no plants growing on it. Yes, so this nourishing process is not going on. So it takes maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and it just jumps up as it was before. So there's no danger to lose something. But for example, if you have compost which has not reached the stage of biocyclic humus soil, it just stops and it doesn't get ripe, and it doesn't get humus soil just by time. It gets humus soil by being planted. Please keep this in the mind. Just for you, which maybe you are now interested in how everybody can help to get this process running, because I have to say again, there is an obstacle. A compost plant cannot get a vegetable production unit, and the farmer cannot buy such a big quantity of phytoponic substrate in order to get a refiner. So there is a need of a financing mechanism. And this financing mechanism is called Terra Plena Fund. You can Google that, you can receive some information, and you can spread the word that there is a possibility to participate in creating humus soil with all its benefits by investing into this process and by being part of this process. And maybe we should arrange another meeting to explain the mechanism of this fund, which is a non-for-profit mechanism benefiting all partners involved into the process and creating local blue economy circles and solving global problems at the same time. So please Google www.terra-plena.com and you will receive some more information of this fantastic mechanism to participate as an individual or as a company or as a farmer or as or whatever you can imagine in order to overcome these economic obstacles, which are really severe. And this is the reason why up to now we didn't have humus soil everywhere available, whereas we could. So
there's a lot of work to do. Thank you very much for the great presentation, and also for all the participants, for all the questions you asked. I think we have another possibilities to come together. If you keep connected to our website, I just try to put it in the chat also. And also we have the one of the Terra Plena. So you have the two websites. From there, you will have the possibility of being in touch.